Good evening, everybody. My name is Shantanu Bharadwaj, and I welcome all of you to the sixth edition of the Way to Wealth BFSI webinar series. The economic turmoil associated with COVID 19 has had wide ranging and severe impacts on various financial markets. There was a huge sell off in the equity markets initially, causing unforeseen portfolio shocks to both large and small investors. What should an equity investor's approach to markets be in such a scenario? Which are the sectors which provide good value currently? Should an investor stick with the relatively safer large caps, or are there opportunities in small and mid cap stocks? Even in such uncertain times, are there certain principles that an investor could apply to generate market beating returns? These are some of the topics which will be discussed in today's presentation titled Equity Market Outlook in Pandemic Environment. Mr. Dheeraj Sachdev, our speaker for this evening, is a well-regarded fund manager and equity markets expert. He is currently Managing Partner and Chief Investment Officer at Roha Asset Managers LLP. Mr. Sachdev has close to 24 years of work experience, predominantly in asset management, covering both mutual funds and portfolio management. Dheeraj had a long stint with the HSBC Global Asset Management Company, during which time he delivered stellar returns while managing the HSBC Mid and Small Cap Fund. In 2017, he was ranked amongst India's best fund managers by Outlook Business and Value Research. Prior to HSBC, he also served with renowned companies like ASK Investments, HDFC Bank, India Infoline, and Hindustan Unilever. The key to his investment success lies in identifying and remaining invested in sustainable growth companies while ignoring short-term market sentiments. Mr. Sachdev is a commerce graduate, a qualified chartered accountant, a cost and management accountant, and holds a diploma in foreign trade management. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, we will have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Please post your queries in the chat box and our speaker will try and answer as many as possible. Over to you, Mr. Dheeraj Sachdev.
Thank you, Shantanu, for this kind introduction. I'll just share the screen. Is it readable to all? You all can view the screen?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, friends. So this is a topic of discussion, equity view in a pandemic environment that we are living in. What I've done is I've broken the presentation into various parts. We'll talk about the current state of affairs post-COVID and the lockdown period in the last 6 months or so, practically. What are the business which have got impacted positively and negatively because of COVID? New world order and themes which are emerging, especially in the post-COVID world. We'll discuss about it. Different sectors, what is our opinion and view for investing? Broader equity view, we'll have a very brief discussion on this as well. Why we like mid and small caps versus large caps and in creation of alpha. And some timeless principles of equity investing, a slide on it. Okay, so the current state of affairs, there's been a considerable ground level improvement. If you look at in the last 6 months since the lockdown period, we have been now in the unlock mode, despite today Europe talking about the second wave, etc., but we believe that people have got out, the economic data has recovered, the scare has reduced quite a lot, and people are wearing masks and obviously with sanitizers getting back into the business. If you look at all the high frequency indicators, be it e-way bills that gets generated, power consumption demand from the industrial side, online payments, I think this is one of the most accelerating thing that has happened post-COVID world, where, for example, grocery consumption has gone up 6x on online versus offline. That has shown improvement. Freight has carried by the trains has shown improvement. Auto numbers, be it two-wheelers and cars, has shown double-digit growth apart from tractors. Commercial vehicle cycle is still will expected to recover with a lag. Mobility trends have also improved. So these are indicating that the activity levels have come back to 90 to 100% levels. If you look at the September GST collection, it is at a 6-month high. Exports have shown a positive momentum after 6 months of decline. Utilization across factories have started increasing. And even the real estate, which has taken 8 to 9 years of a very, very bad cycle, has started rebounding across almost top 7 cities. In fact, some incentive was given by the Maharashtra property registration, kind of lower registration charges till March if somebody is willing to buy a property within the state. So even that registration number has surpassed the pre-COVID levels of January. Now we believe that a lot of this recovery and improvement is somewhat partly led by pent-up demand because March, April, May, June, there were very less purchases or shopping from the Indian consumer, except for essential commodities. But largely it is led by pent-up demand and also inventory filling ahead of the festive season, which is driving the recovery. Now, the most important thing that we have to look forward is whether this is sustainable beyond the festive season demand. But broadly, it's interesting to note that people have adapted and accepted COVID, and things are back to business across the sectors. And we'll also talk about a few of the sectors which are still vulnerable and will recover with a lag. So what are the businesses which have got impacted? So clearly negative for the COVID environment, travel. Obviously, the travel businesses have got severely impacted. Hotels has seen very less occupancy levels. Even the restaurants business have got impacted, though the things are coming back. Aviation is where the number of flyers have come down. Apparel, I think a lot of people are working from home, so the formal clothing or apparel purchase has also gone for a toss. Offline retail, I think this is one of the biggest getting disrupted at the cost of online retailing or shopping. And I think this will take a long time to come back. Financials, I think financial sector, which has lent to most of the SME side of the businesses or personal loan, are also getting vulnerable in the form of NPA, except for those who are into more secure lending or housing finance or microfinance because they are in the essential commodities. I think most of the financials, NBFCs and banking sector is also getting the pressure of post-COVID environment. The sectors which have got positively impacted include pharma, health and hygiene. I think that has really gone up given the fact that people who are resorting to nutrition, better diet, etc. Essential products, obviously there is no lack of demand. Food processing or packaged food has gone up as far as the sales is concerned. Consumer durables, I'm told there is a phenomenal demand for be it air conditioning, refrigerators, washing machines, dishwashers, etc., etc. So I think the consumer durable segment is coming back very sharply. Online and digital, I think whether it's online purchases, online payments, gaming business because people are resorted to indoors, so gaming has gone up, or even digital content or OTT platforms has seen a rise in subscriptions. So there are businesses which are feeling the impact or negative impact of COVID environment, and there are many businesses which are actually accelerating, especially the online and the digital world has got accelerated in a post-COVID environment. We are also seeing some interesting themes which are emerging, which will benefit lot many Indian businesses. And I would call it as a new world order. There is expected to be increased outsourcing to India. We've heard about outsourcing word. It's not a latest word, but the technology and the pharmaceutical segment has already penetrated, and the outsourcing is only on the rise for these sectors. But there are a lot many new sectors which are expected to see increased outsourcing apart from IT and pharma. And we'll come to those sectors as well. The other interesting theme which is the import substitution. I think for long we had literally a lot of competition from imports, and it was like a global economy. Today, most of the countries, including India, is somewhat resorting to more a protectionist environment, and which means there is an need for import substitution for the local manufacturers. So the anti-dumping duty levels have gone up, and the anti-China wave is only accelerating this import substitution wave. The third theme that we believe is going to further accelerate is the data revolution. We already talked about digitization and online payments and online purchases. Fourth is the consumer habits are changing very fast, and we'll talk about which are the consumer habits which are changing. Fifth is the unorganized to organized shift, because the organized players have more balance sheet bandwidth and deeper pockets to sustain a very tough environment, which means the unorganized sector is losing in this environment. And as a result of which the shift is happening. Sixth is the R&D and the green tech. I think like a lot of talk has been made about research and development and green technology. And I think that is only going to accelerate going forward. So whether it's a renewable energy or electric cars, etc., I think this is the trend which is a very structural and long-term in nature. So this we have read in the newspaper. It's just nothing but it talks about why the world is looking at alternatives to China, and India is the best poised. Of course, there are countries like Japan, South Korea as possible alternatives for importing other than China as an alternate to China. But this clipping only talks about the telecom equipment. For example, China has been a supplier of low-cost telecom gears, telecom equipments, telecom networks across the world, including India. And what the Department of Telecommunication is talking about is we need to have a substitution of local manufacturing versus a lot of Chinese imports that happens in the telecom imports. And I think that is what is a serious step which is taken not only in telecom, but many other sectors as well. So we have highlighted what are the sectors which will benefit out of shift from China. And these include local manufacturers in specialty chemicals, pharmaceuticals, APIs, which is active pharmaceutical intermediates, technology, food processing, home furnishing and textiles, garments, autos, precision engineering products. So many of these sectors are expected to benefit out of alternatives to China. So these are the possible areas of business where exports can happen and increase over time. The other thing that we talked about is the Atmanirbhar or import substitution theme. I think this is just getting accelerated. It's just the beginning. And various initiatives has been taken to promote local manufacturing. We call it Atmanirbhar Bharat. But if you actually look at it, what has been done? The government has actually provided PLI or production linked incentive scheme to drive local manufacturing. And we've already seen whether it's Foxtron, Pegatron, Dixon Technologies, etc., getting large orders to manufacture not only electronics, but LED TVs, anything in the electronics, LED TVs, mobile phones, etc. And that can become 20, 30, 40,000 crore incremental business opportunity as far as manufacturing in India is concerned. There has been also a rise in import tariffs, which is expected to lead to import substitution. Corporate tax reduction has happened, we all know, and that is making India more cost competitive on the taxation front. Besides, the labor cost and energy cost has come down. We've already saw the natural gas prices coming down majorly in the last 12 months or so. So all these cost items, which were making us uncompetitive, have become very, very competitive on a global landscape. Besides, we talked about the global anti-China climate or a China plus one strategy for global outsourcers. So India stands to benefit across many of the segments. The only thing that I'm worried about is while this is a good sentiment, we still have a long way to go in terms of ensuring that we have ease of doing business, and our land and labor reforms are majorly restructured to ensure that the business people find it flexible in terms of whether it's land acquisition or in terms of labor employment. Some of the states have already begun this journey. We've already seen UP state government talking about fine-tuning such a thing. And I'm sure to generate employment, we'll have more other states following the same step to ensure or invite more foreign capital for local manufacturing. So what are the sectors that are expected to benefit out of this import substitution? We believe electronics, medical devices, again chemicals and APIs, consumer durables, defense equipments, and metals. I think defense for long, almost 20 years, we had offset clause where we talked about at least 30% sourcing from Indian manufacturers, but it never materialized. I think this time we are talking about a very serious measure of local manufacturing. For example, Bharat Forge has started manufacturing machine guns and also exporting the same. So this shows that the private sector has taken a very keen interest in manufacturing very expensive defense items as well. Data revolution, I think all are familiar with it. It has been the need of the hour. It has been rising at a very, very rapid pace because of affordable internet, thanks to one large private player like Jio, and others have also followed it. And of course, the mobile internet has become affordable, and people are even doing shopping on mobile. Now, if you analyze some of the data during the lockdown period, lot many people actually viewed the online version, whether it's television, OTT, playing games, and usage of screens, whether it's mobile or television or set-top boxes, has gone up. Besides, we have already seen not many downloads on the health and video chats. So this data revolution is actually captivating literally every part of the economy and every Indians across different genre or ages. And if you look at number of internet users in India, it is expected to penetrate far higher over the next 5 to 10 years. And that's the bar graph. If I have to recollect the figure, because the figure shows very rapid acceleration, it's expected to be more than 90 to 190 crores of Indians, or close to that number, which will be the internet users in times to come. The other part is that we have already seen Samsung and Apple, which are the biggest mobile manufacturers globally. They have partnered with India in terms of smartphone production programs. So that is also part of the production linked incentive scheme. So what are the sectors that are expected to benefit out of it? Which includes technology service providers, data security, e-commerce companies, online beneficiaries like retail. I'm talking about online retail, logistics companies who are providing services online, BPO services, lending and insurance on the online platform. So these are the businesses and segments which are expected to benefit big time. Changing consumer habits. I think we are in a new generation where the habits are changing and there is an upgradation happening. More technology driven and savvy generation that we are living in. And this is changing due to e-commerce and better exposure. So when we talk about, again, the slide may not depict, it has low font size, but the number of online shopping has gone up geometrically, not even arithmetically. So in a geometric proportion, we have seen numbers rising. I already talked about almost 6x increase in number of people using online platform for even grocery shopping, which used to be a local kirana shopping or a local fruit wala shopping. I think that has changed materially. Even senior citizens have adopted to getting online shopping, which they were so far reluctant. Many other trends which have been observed amongst Indian consumers include increase in female shoppers, renting of products versus buying, information-based buying, buying any product that saves time, and buying health and wellness products, which has been seen a dramatic increase, especially the immunity boosters products. So what are the sectors, again, which are expected to benefit out of this theme of the new generation? It includes large format retail, large format stores, which are also into online platform. Exchanges, when I'm saying exchanges, it could be any kind of exchanges, whether it is commodity exchanges or brokerage exchanges or brokerage in the financial services platform or equity exchanges. Personal mobility, obviously the new generation feels scared about getting into the public transport, largely because of Corona scare as well. So personal mobility is on the rise. Branded products, packaged food, nutrition and healthcare, gadgets and gaming. I think these are the sectors which are poised to have a very structural kind of a growth in times to come. And this is not going to change. These are very long-term changes. And we are just in the beginning of this life cycle of many of the new emerging businesses. The other notable thing which has got accelerated in a post-COVID world is a shift to the organized sector. We already know that unorganized has been losing market share to the organized players in many of the sectors, whether it is branded apparels or footwear or jewelry making or jewelry retailing. It is only getting accelerated because the environment has been very tough for the unorganized players to survive. They had working capital issues. They could not manage the distributors' inventory, which means that the organized players had deep pockets to survive in a very, very tough environment. I mean, if you look at the percentage share of organized retail, it has already gone up, and we expect that it will multiply 3x over the almost 3x over the last 8. It has already multiplied 3x over the last 8 years, and maybe further multiplied over the next 5 years by at least 3 times. Which are the sectors where the shift is happening? It includes again branded apparels, plywood, footwear, jewelry retailing, staffing services. The next revolution when we talk about can be termed as green technology or any kind of R&D innovation-led businesses. These are new age businesses, and typically they are found in a small and mid caps versus large caps, because they start small and then they become big. Typically next revolution companies, if we invest, they provide early mover advantage. There is superior return or alpha opportunity if we invest in such high growth businesses at an initial stage of their life cycle. And we are already seeing companies which are accelerating digital spends, which include whether it's robotic manufacturing, 3D printing, Internet of Things, cloud computing, machine learning, data analytics. If you look at the technology companies' results which have declared in the last few days, they're all talking about automation, cloud computing, Internet of Things. I think that's a digital transformation. I think that has accelerated in the post-COVID world. We again, if you highlight few of the sectors which are expected to benefit out of this, it includes e-commerce, technology platform companies, testing laboratories. These are all the new businesses. Biologics and food technology, which are again driven by innovation. Agro seeds, robotics, wearables where again you can actually have a theater experience by using these wearables. Artificial intelligence, chemicals and renewable energy. So a lot of innovation is happening across these many areas, and we believe that this will only accelerate over the next many years. I'll come to the sectors view in brief. So we believe that consumer companies offer more sustainable and stable investment strategy. Excuse me. And whether these companies include those are in the business of food processing or beverages, whether it is tea, coffee, or soft drinks, or personal and hygiene, because most of these companies are considered, or businesses are considered as essential, and they had a very limited impact out of the COVID environment. So these are the companies in the consumer sector where we believe growth is sustainable. Of course, in some cases, one has to be very careful about the valuation of companies that while investing. Other area where we believe the growth is very structural and secular is agriculture, that produce farm equipment like tractors, fertilizers, seed and crop protection companies, be it insecticides or pesticides or herbicides. One thing that has been noticed this year has been record monsoon. In fact, the third best in the last 30 years. Manrega scheme, which has been offered by the government, which is increasing rural demand. MSP price hikes, which is the minimum support price hike that has happened, almost 12%. The hike of agro commodities has gone up, which means more disposable income at the hands of the farmers. And that is going to drive agriculture related businesses. Specialty chemicals is another area where we believe what pharmaceutical sector was 20 years back is expected to get repeated over the next 10, 15, 20 years. There's considerable shift which is happening from Chinese players who are manufacturing specialty chemicals to Indian players. One important thing which is required in this business is pollution control norms and zero discharge facilities. So China is driving very high pollution control norms, which has led to a lot of shutdown in China of many specialty chemicals. So this business is shifting to India, and a lot of Indian companies have adopted to zero discharge or very efficient effluent treatment norms on par with global standards. Besides, the China Plus One strategy will also have specialty chemicals business benefiting out of this anti-China climate and using India as an alternate source. Pharma companies, again, the view is very positive. Whether it's the API space, whether it's the select chronic therapies in the domestic market, or complex generics which is exported to US and European markets or the regulated markets. We again believe a lot of supply shift will happen from China, even in pharma products going forward. along with improvements on the pricing front, the pricing of the end products, and lower raw material costs. This will be a classic case where the margins of many of the pharma companies will continue to rise, except for some of them which are into commodity chemicals, which had temporary abnormal price increases because of supply shortage, and that supply has come back. But by and large, we believe pharma companies stand on a strong footing. Metals is another area. The commodity prices have gone up. There has been a renewed demand in China and across regulated and Western economies. And we believe the commodity prices have gone up. Like for example, steel price in local India has gone up by almost close to 4,000 rupees per ton. Similarly, ferrous and non-ferrous like aluminium and zinc prices have gone up by almost 12 to 19%. That shows that the demand trends for the metal sector is coming back. Autos, again, the view seems to be fairly positive because people are preferring and will only continue to prefer personal mobility versus traveling in public transport. We are already seeing the September numbers that has come out from, or monthly numbers that has come out from or reported from the car manufacturers and the two-wheeler manufacturers has shown a sharp recovery. Again, part of the recovery may be led by pent-up demand, but we believe that demand is likely to sustain given that the personal mobility trends will continue. Financials, the view is somewhat uncertain because we've just begun from 1st of October. The moratorium period has got over, which means we need to still test whether the borrowers will repay efficiently to the lenders like banks or NBFCs. Most of the MSME or small businesses are at risk, especially the shopkeepers, etc., which are or a mall or the malls where the turnout has been low, and they are their balance sheets are in debt, so they will have problems in repaying back to the banks. They are at risk, but the retail housing, gold loan portfolio, and microfinance are better placed because microfinance is generally lent to dairy and essential commodities, all women loan, and they are better placed within the financial sector. Tourism, of course, the view is still negative. They'll take longer time despite the fact that cinema halls have opened and travel is permitted. But to attain the near normalcy will take long time. Media advertising will again take long time as a business. Commercial vehicles within autos will again take at least 6 months to 12 months before the existing inventory gets reduced. Real estate sector, while things have started improving, but we still believe that it has a long way to go because the existing inventory has only got reduced by about 15 to 20%. A lot of unsold inventory still exists in one of the major or many major metros, whether it's Bangalore, Delhi, Bombay, and some of the larger towns. The prices have not recovered. It is the affordable housing which has led to some kind of a revival, but the unsold inventory still lies a lot in the system. So these are some of the negative sectors according to our view. We also don't like excessive consumer staple companies which are quoting at about 50 to 60 times their earnings. So there is no room, much of a room for upside to invest in the sector. So broadly, what's the market view? Our belief is that structurally, as we are living in a very low interest world globally, and central bankers have offered massive stimulus of trillions of dollars, and interest rates is largely going to be low, we believe emerging markets will continue to have a fairly decent rally despite sharp corrections in intermediate periods like the one we had today. Emerging markets are poised for a greater rally in times to come. Within that, even equities, just like gold, equities will have a better asset class, and equity will be a better asset class compared to fixed income or real estate or any other asset classes, which will obviously yield much lower returns. Even real estate rental yields are less than 2 or 3%. So the yields in other asset classes are much lower, and that's why equity will continue to be a preferred asset class. But broadly speaking, I think a lot of liquidity will be driven across emerging markets, and equity will have a more structural rally going forward, given the fact that stimulus will be driving it globally because most of the central bankers will be pro-growth. They want to ensure the unemployment rate comes down. They want to promote business and ensure that the low interest rates regime prevails till the time the economy recovers back smartly. So we believe at least for the next 18 months, this stance of global central bankers will continue along with lower interest rates, or if or and we believe that the inflation is fairly relatively okay, is likely to be okay till that period before it becomes before it becomes a meaningful trend upwards. We also believe that the polarized market will become more and more broad-based. See that the first stage of the rally typically happens to some of the large caps and very high quality companies. And in the last 3 years, it had been a very polarized market. Till the time the last few months rally is indicating that the rally will be more broad-based in character, which means the mid and small caps will also start participating. We still believe there is a lot of value in the broader market because the polarized market will get shifted to becoming more and more broad-based. And going forward, value will outperform the quality stocks because the quality stocks have largely become overpriced. So what is going to work in the investment portfolio will be a superior stock selection, and when in investing in those companies where balance sheet hygiene remains intact. This will be a prudent combination for generating alpha. Of course, there will be volatility around US elections because we are entering US elections, and historically it has been proved whenever there is US election, there is heightened volatility. But all those volatility and corrections, if any, according to our view, will be short-lived. And I think one should be entering in such kind of panics or corrections. The structural themes that we talked about, at least 5 or 6 themes we discussed earlier, make sense for long-term investing, which includes import substitution, changing consumer habits, unorganized to organized shift, or increased outsourcing of many other businesses apart from technology and pharma. I would like to quote here one important sentence from Peter Lynch's book. It says that people who succeed in the stock market also accept periodic losses, setbacks, and unexpected occurrences. Such kind of major drops or calamitous drops do not scare them out of the game. So if you actually look at it, what happened in March, in the month of March panic, or even if you go back to history, the demonetization panic, further go back, or Euro crisis of 2012, further go back, Lehman crisis of 2008, and beyond, dot-com bubble bursting. Every time these panics happened, those were great opportunities in disguise for long-term investors. And I think this is going to get repeated time and again. Why mid and small caps? I think it provides early mover advantage, fantastic, because the large caps are already discovered ideas. Their elephants cannot dance, so their ability to grow tends to come down. Whereas small and mid cap companies offer many wide choices across new businesses as well before they become large caps. So there is an early mover advantage. Many of the companies are under-researched, which leads to mispricing and attractive valuation for superior upside. There's wide spectrum of businesses to choose from, which may not necessarily be available in large caps. For example, specialty chemicals or some of the emerging companies in the technology business may not be in like large caps. Large caps may have technology service providers or maybe no large specialty chemical company. But they have given phenomenal compounded returns in the last 8 years, despite the fact that they are still considered as small or mid caps. There is higher growth opportunity versus large caps. That's why we prefer mid and small caps. So lastly, I would like to talk about some of the equity principles which are classic and universal across all time periods. One should be looking at buying below intrinsic value and selling at a higher price. I mean, when you talk about intrinsic value, it is not the price which is quoted on the stock exchange. It is something that one has to value the business based on the cash flows or a discounted cash flows over the life cycle of the business or the company. So that's the intrinsic value versus the price that we talk about. And if there is a margin of safety, that's an essential foundation for profitable investing. If one gets emotional in the markets rather than being rational, he's generally a loser in the market. So one has to be unemotional, ignore the noise and ignore the sentiments of the market, do the valuation of the business and the companies that you are looking at, look at the potential opportunity size and the ability to compound, and take an investment decision, rather than looking at the noise or hearing noise, day-to-day noise in the markets or getting sentimental about it. Economic and market cycles do go up and down. One should not extrapolate because that can be dangerous. If you look at recessions and euphoric phases have been historically proved to be short-lived. I mean, Obviously, it can live longer for a few years as well, but it can't go in one direction forever. So one has to take advantage of these cycles, and this psychology or understanding of the market cycles and economic cycle is a very important discipline to be a good investor, rather than just accounting and economics. While we should know accounting and economics, but more importantly, the psychology of the market is more essentially an important element of human behavior that can work for the investor to make money. Psychology of herd causes market extremes. We have seen that in March panic, everybody was in a herd mentality that this corona will actually create a big recession globally. And that's a time when the markets bottomed out and started scaling up. So people who invested at that point of time as a contrarian today are sitting in a lot of gains. The same thing happened in Lehman crisis. The same thing happened in dot-com bubble bursting. The same thing happened in a very short interval of demonetization period when the market crashed. One has to be aware of the pendulum of euphoria or depression or celebration to morose between overpriced or underpriced, because market will never have a rational pricing or of rational pricing. It will move in the pendulum of extremes, excessive euphoria or complete state of panic. And the reality will be somewhere in between. So if somebody is aware of this extreme nature and understand that the mean reversion will happen eventually, then one can take advantage of this pendulum of the market. Because extreme behavior do reverse or mean revert, and the extremeness only is a temporary window of opportunity. So if the market crashes happen, it doesn't offer too much time period to remain there for longer period, and one should be taking advantage of that. Similarly, most trends, whether it's bullish or bearish, eventually become overdone and extreme. So just like a rubber band, if you stretch it too far, it has to mean revert. Similarly, that's the state of the market that gets repeated time and again. There's a difference between perceived risk and real risk. When the perceived risk is high, the real risk is actually low. For example, in the month of March, when everybody was scared of coronavirus and the markets panicked globally, it was a heightened perceived risk. If we had rational thinking that, okay, things will get back to normal one day with all the precautions, business will be back, market is overreacting as if it's going to be a permanent feature, and which is wrong, then one could have taken advantage of. Similarly, all the crises that have happened in the last 20 years, those have been perceived risks of extreme, and the markets have bounced back, and the real risk was actually low. Because if the markets and stock prices have already corrected sharply, and if there is no permanent damage to the existence of the business or the company, then one should be taking advantage of that extreme behavior of the market. So these eventually pay off. When the perceived risk is high, the real risk is low. The point of maximum pessimism is the point of maximum return. I mean, this has worked beautifully across all time periods in the market. One should be more aggressive in a panicky environment and vice versa. Timing is a futile market exercise. People often tell me what should be, I will probably invest when the Nifty is at 1,000 levels or lower, or when the Nifty corrects by 5%, or this particular stock corrects by 10%. It is a futile exercise because you will never be able to time it accurately. Time in the market is more important than timing the market. So these have been some of the extracts from a well-known investor, Howard Marks, and I thought it'll be fruitful to discuss these timeless principles because it's going to be often repeated over many, many years as long as you're an equity investor. With that, I will conclude my discussion on the markets. I'll be happy to take any kind of questions from your side.
Thank you, Mr. Dheeraj, for your insights on various sectors and themes that are showing certain decent proposition in this ray of darkness, basically where everyone is worried about COVID. You have put given us some highlights on certain sectors which are getting benefits from certain from the various activities of the various countries. I would like to take certain questions from our participants. First is from Mr. Rajesh Shah. His question is, while one seeks to do investment, what should be the better proposition, either mutual fund investment or a direct investment proposition?
I think I would always propose that equity investing requires a lot of discipline and behavior, professional behavior. because it's not, and it requires a lot of deep analysis on the companies that one is investing in. So if you don't have the time to analyze companies and have the right discipline, it's always advisable to go through a professional advisor, professional fund manager, rather than direct investing.
Second question is from Mr. Ramchandra Mahauli. He wants to ask this question: post-COVID scenario, apart from healthcare, pharma, e-commerce, which are the other sectors which can show decent performance?
Yeah, so I already covered in detail. So apart from healthcare, pharma, a lot of consumer companies like consumer durables will do well. We're talking about personal mobility, so auto sector and auto ancillary companies will do well. Cement is another area that we like. We believe the cement has as a business has a lot of entry barriers, and a lot of companies are expanding capacities, whether it is for low cost housing, concretization of roads, and infrastructure. So cement is another area that we believe structurally looks interesting for the long term. Apart from that, we believe capital goods can come back smartly as more and more infrastructure investment that happens. Defense is another area where we like. Healthcare and nutrition. Pharma is one side of the story, but nutrition, wellness, healthcare are other businesses that can do decently well. Yeah, any kind of online platform related business. So whether it's a commodity exchanges, stock exchanges, online firms providing retail services, all can do well.
We have one more question from Mr. Ramchandra Mauli. He's asking whether the recent passing of farm bills will have any impact on the markets.
I think it's structurally very, very positive. The elimination of the intermediary like mandis means that the farmers can directly access corporate customers and other customers and consumers for their farm produce, including the government, and which means that they can fetch better prices, elimination of intermediary commission. So I think it's a very, very big reform. Unfortunately, some of the states are opposing for some of their vested interests because maybe the local government is involved in this business as an intermediary and they have their own vested interest. But by and large, I think it's a very, very landmark reform that the government has concluded.
Another question is from Mr. Vivekanand Pradhan. He is asking a question: according to you, which is the sector which is evergreen to invest?
So I touched upon all the sectors that have been covered. So largely we believe consumer, pharmaceutical, automobiles, agriculture related sectors, be it tractors, those producing seeds, those which are in the business of pesticides or crop protection products, anything which is related to agriculture, it should also do well because the government has target of doubling farm income over the next few years. This farmer reforms which has happened will also increase their income over time, if not in the immediate future. So anything which is related to agriculture, specialty chemicals, which talks about more outsourcing because of China Plus One strategy, electronics, consumer durables, automobiles, anything which is related to online and e-commerce are structurally poised for long-term investment.
Okay. The next question is from Mr. Anand Biani. How will you, what is your view on the PSU space going forward?
So PSU depends because there are a lot many PSUs who are very efficient and they are in the monopoly business. And there are a lot many PSUs which are inefficient. We've seen that in the banking sector, especially the PSU banks. I think you're already seeing they need to be capitalized time and again. They have destroyed investor wealth. They're losing CASA franchisee market share to private banks. So one has to be careful rather than basketing all the companies of PSUs in one basket. It's better to be very selectively, because some of the railway PSUs are doing well. Some of them which are into port sector are doing well. They are efficient with a virtual monopoly with very high entry barriers. I think they will have very sustainable business model, and they have a sustainable business model. But many others will get disrupted as well at the cost of at the hands of private sector. So I have no straight answer to it. One has to be selective on which business that you're talking about. But PSU banks in general is definitely avoidable.
So Ashok Mala has this question. If somebody has to do sector-wise allocation of the portfolio, can you suggest any percentage of sectors and the sectors basically?
No, because we are typically bottom-up stock pickers. We may have 25% to 30% weightage across 4 companies or 5 companies in a particular sector. So there is nothing that we have identified where we talk about 30% has to be in pharma, 40% has to be in consumer, 20% has to be in the infrastructure. Nothing of that sort. We are very bottom-up stock pickers and craft our portfolio. But by and large, chemicals, pharmaceuticals, agriculture, consumer should occupy at least 50 to 60% of your portfolio.
So Mr. Arun Amar has this question. Should P ratio be a good value to interpret a stock, or it's kind of an outdated version now?
Oh, it is pretty outdated. I think it is one of the horrible ratios to evaluate a company. It's very simple. P multiple is just price divided by earnings. But it does not capture the earnings over the life cycle of the company. It takes into account only 1 year forward and 1 year trailing earnings. It doesn't talk too much about investing principle. It may just talk about, okay, that's a number and it may look optically expensive, but over times to come, that can be one of the best investments. Similarly, something which looks very, very cheap on a PE multiple basis can actually be worthless because they may not survive the competition from a high quality business. So PE is absolutely a useless way to evaluate a company. What is more important is to evaluate based on the cash flows that the company can generate over the life of its existence. So we take a 10-year period, just like any other DCF models, and then a terminal value and terminal growth rate. And based on that is a right appropriate method for evaluating a company.
So Dheeraj, I have a personal question. So while we see the economy moving right now because of the stimulus packages and most of the run-up is liquidity driven, but 2 sectors like the real estate sector and infrastructure sector, which are the real employers of the economy, are actually not moving because there are high cases of unemployment, people not receiving proper income, and spending power is reducing, and that's why the credit economy is growing very much. So do we, going forward, maybe the post-COVID scenario, what time frame will these 2 sectors take to come up and come out to the original pre-COVID levels?
So I'll talk about the infrastructure first. See, infra is largely led by government and state spending.
True.
Of course, the state government, GST collections, they have some working capital issues, but they are not going back on not constructing road projects, port projects, airports, highways, waterways. I think those the government spending infra-related projects are very much on track, except that the working capital cycles for the companies who are in the EPC or infrastructure, they will have delays in the payment cycle. But otherwise, government has been accelerating its road projects and other infrastructure projects. On the real estate side, yes, things will take longer. I'm still not very positive. The only positive part is that the interest rates have come down. Today, your home loan rates have come down to below 7% level. I think that could be one of the drivers. Some state governments are offering incentives in the form of lower stamp duty when you buy a house. Affordable housing may see still increase in demand. The work from home will also accelerate maybe bigger houses. Somebody is staying in 1 BHK would like to shift to 2 BHK, 2 BHK would like to shift to 3 BHK, so that you have an extra room for work from home. I think that will drive some kind of an incremental demand. But yes, it's going to be very slow and gradual recovery because the cost of financing of home has come down dramatically. And these things will drive the demand, which is work from home concept. or affordable housing. Other than that, the inventory level is still very high, which is unsold, and we do not expect that recovery time frame to be at least 2 years before the unsold inventory completely gets replenished or sold out. But the larger players will benefit, which will take away market share from the unorganized and local builders. We know Godrej's of the world and others will take away market share from others, from the local builders.
So the next question is from Mr. Arun Ambar. So we hear most of the market, Robinhood investors coming into the fray and probably participating in the markets. What's your advice on those kind of equity investors in the current area, current zone, basically?
Yeah, these Robinhood traders needs to be very cautious because they have only seen one side of the market playing out in the last 6 months. When the other side happens, one has to look at all the cycles, the bull and the bear cycle as well, to have the experience of not leveraging or not going by the tips. One has to do their own research about the companies or take professional advice. I think that's what I can recommend and suggest them, not to go for reckless investing or a hope-based investing or tips or leverage trading. I think that should be completely avoided.
So I think we are done from the questions from the participants. So I think Ashish, can you take it over from here for a vote of thanks?
Yes, yes. So thank you. Good evening. I am Ashish Trivedi from Way2 Wealth. I thank you everyone for your enthusiastic participation in today's event. Mr. Dharesh Sachdev, it was a pleasure to be here. It was a very informative session today on this equity market outlook in pandemic environment. I'm sure that the investors have gained through in these valuable insights provided by you today, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Pleasure being here.
Thank you. And our event partner, Blossom Advisors and Consultants Private Limited, has been helping us conducting the webinar series of these BFSI webinars. Blossom Advisor is actually a 5-year young boutique debt syndication firm based out of Mumbai with focus on supply chain and structured trade finance. Thank you, Mr. Rajesh Khemani from Blossom. Our next webinar will be in a fortnight by now. A link of recording of this webinar, a feedback survey link, and the registration details of our next webinar will be mailed to all the participants. With this, we come to the end of today's session. See you soon in the next webinar. Thank you very much. Good evening.